It's the economy, stupid. Our fringe presidential politics spooking the US economy. Also on today's program, failing the rhino, why humans can't stop killing the endangered species. And in Picture This, on the political brink, thousands protest as Brazil's president chooses a controversial chief of staff. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. The world over, economic policies and promises have shaped and decided elections. And this year's race to the White House is no different. It's no secret that this year's primary season has been one of the most polarized spectacles in American politics. Both parties have extreme contenders vying for the presidential nomination, and that means extreme economics. Both Trump and Sanders have challenged establishment policies and appealed to the voting public's visceral fear of economic disenfranchisement. Today's newsmakers are these two, the billionaire and the democratic socialist, whose economic policies, some say, are a danger to both the American and the global economy.
Employment, taxes and industry. Wages, benefits and trade. All key concerns for voters and for the presidential hopefuls. The economy has been at the front and centre of the US presidential candidate contest. But it's the two Washington outsiders who have been leading much of the debate. Both sit on the fringes. One is a social democrat calling for Wall Street regulation and higher taxes. The other, an international business mogul, campaigning on protectionist policies.
From Wall Street to Washington,
we are going to create an economy,
not just the 1%.
0.1%, not just millionaires and billionaires.
Bernie Sanders has been firing up millennials and anti-establishment voters with his far-left rhetoric on ending inequality. Sanders says he would put a 10% tax surcharge on billionaires, raise the top 3 tax brackets, and create a new top rate. He would also raise taxes on business and overseas profits. In exchange, he's promising to increase the minimum wage to $15, provide more benefits for workers, and spend more on infrastructure. Holding Wall Street to account has been the main theme of Sanders' economic strategy. He is promising to break up financial institutions and tax speculative trading to help fund free college tuition. While Sanders' grip on the Democratic nomination is slipping, the impact he's had will remain. He's already caused a shift in rhetoric from Hillary Clinton, pushing the focus and forcing her further to the left. He's ignited the masses tired of the mainstream, and Hillary Clinton may have to absorb some of that fire to stop those seeking change, flipping to the other end of the spectrum.
We're going to take back trade. China doesn't even like us.
Cars are going to be made in our country.
It'll grow the American economy.
I will create jobs. I beat China all the time. I'm a world-class business guy.
Business tycoon Donald Trump is promising to be the greatest jobs producer in history and is using his own business track record as evidence of his economic credentials. Donald Trump says he would lower income and corporate tax rates and eliminate tax loopholes. He would reduce the deficit that causes by cuts in wasteful spending. Donald Trump says trade is what's killing the American dream. He's promising to impose tariffs on Chinese and Mexican imports to encourage US manufacturing. He says he would also renegotiate the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement and create jobs for Americans by eliminating outsourcing. Some economists are warning Trump's protectionist approach won't work. Others are warning it could be a major threat to the global economy. Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to discuss how the likes of Sanders and Trump's presidential campaigns are affecting the economy and will affect the economy. In New York is Jeff Madrick. He's a former economics columnist for the New York Times and author of the book End of Affluence. And in Washington, D.C. is Gordon Gray. He was Deputy Director of Economic Policy for Senator John McCain's presidential campaign. He's now the Director of Fiscal Policy at the American Action Institute. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining us. Let me start with you, Gordon. We all woke up to the Economist Intelligence Unit saying that one of the top 10 global risks, the same as jihadi terrorism and riskier than an armed clash in the South China Sea, is a Donald Trump presidency. Are they out of their minds, or are they serious about this?
Well, I think there's certainly an understandable amount of concern about a Donald Trump presidency. It's one I share, given what we've heard from him. But then again, he hasn't exactly put forward a comprehensive policy platform that's easy for observers to really assess. We've heard a lot of rhetoric. And you know, the primary process is still ongoing, so it's premature to assume that he's going to be in the White House. But I would share the concern about what a Trump presidency may offer in terms of economic policy.
Jeff, is that at the root of all of their anxieties, those at the Economist Intelligence Unit and others, the root being that he is so unpredictable and reckless?
Well, I think we don't know what Trump's final plan is going to be. The only hope is that he tames himself some, and I don't want to bank anything on that kind of hope. He has talked about severe, dramatic tax cuts that nobody, even supply-side Reaganites, think could possibly work. He says it will generate enough growth to pay for everything he wants, including maintaining Social Security benefits, Medicare, and so on. That's a pipe dream. There's probably room for tax cuts. I strongly disagree that we should have tax cuts. The Reagan tax cuts, in fact, did not work to put the economy back on a stable track. In fact, the deficit was high when Reagan left office, which people seem to forget readily. But we need our tax increases and government social programs that get America and working people in America and poor working people in America back on track with a chance to have a decent standard of living.
Yeah, I know you guys will disagree on Reagan and his legacy, so I don't want to go down that debate. But Jeff, is it unfair of us to ask the question if Bernie Sanders might be equally reckless in his approach when he's saying free school and he's saying single-payer healthcare and he's saying let's go to war with the 1%? Is he equally reckless, Jeff?
Well, I don't think he's equally reckless. I think his plan, if it were enacted the way he would like to enact it, would not be reckless. Whether he can enact that plan, whether he can bring Congress along with him. Remember, if Bernie Sanders wins, it actually means a vast change in public opinion. Congress is not immune to the influence of that vast change. So it's not Congress as it now is and Bernie Sanders as president. Some things will change. Will we be able to get something like a $15 or $16 trillion tax increase? I think it will be hard to do. Will Bernie Sanders move us in a direction that is more beneficial? I think he probably would, but the jury is out on that.
Okay, Gordon, you're a Republican. Well, I guess you're not too keen on a Bernie Sanders president or a presidency or a Hillary Clinton dragged further to the left by Bernie Sanders and his promises.
Right. Well, first, I'd like to point out there's an adage where it's if you think healthcare is expensive now, just wait until it's free. There have been estimates about what a Sanders healthcare plan would cost. I've seen some upwards of $40 trillion. Even his tax increases that are an order of magnitude higher than what even President Obama has proposed aren't enough to pay for that. When you just think about it, President Sanders would seek to basically have open-ended and unrestricted health care benefits. So just imagine, every time someone wants to go to the doctor, they can, and there's no out-of-pocket cost for them. Just imagine what the incentives are. It will ultimately lead to just a rationing of care, and there's just no way to pay for it. And massive tax increases and massive government spending also don't work. So frankly, neither of them are coming at the economic puzzle with any degree of, I think, solutions that we need. And secondly, the idea that Bernie Sanders is going to bring Congress along is almost laughable when you consider he's been in Congress for so long and has virtually no legislative accomplishments.
Okay, let's get a response from Jeff.
Well, I don't know why you say that, Gordon. If he wins a general election, It's very different than being a senator from Vermont. But let me point this out. We don't have to imagine what free health care could be. We have it in much of the rich world right now. And those people pay a heck of a lot less per capita for their health care than we do. In many cases, about half what we pay. And by serious measures of health outcomes, they do better in many areas than we do. So I don't know what you're talking about when you say free health care means runaway health care. We don't have to imagine it. We have it already.
Quick response from you, Gordon, because I want to move on to other issues here. Final word on health care before I move on.
Well, one is, right. Just these international comparisons are, I think, do a disservice to the debate because it's not one size fit all. You can't just up and move and pretend like every economy in every country is the same and that every policy solution will work in every circumstance. It's just not the case.
Okay. Got a question for you, Gordon, about...
It works in many circumstances, Gordon.
Jeff, I want to move on. I want to move on to China, and I want to ask Gordon, Trump talking tough on China, saying they're cheating, he's going to get tough on them. Is he basically putting a gun to his head and committing suicide and taking the United States and the world economy with it if he does that, if he becomes president?
Well, I think the people that are going to get most hurt by Trump's, import tax or just massive tariffs are going to be American families. The folks that rely on goods, consumer goods from overseas. There's a reason why we import goods from China. And so ultimately, what it's going to do is harm people at home. It's going to harm them in their pocketbooks. It's going to amount to thousands of dollars in new costs. It's going to be a tax. It's just not going to be a tax on China. It's going to be a tax on the American family.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, I want to ask you about Hillary Clinton. On NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, on the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, she initially supported both. Now she wants to renegotiate NAFTA and she's opposed to TPP. Is she moving towards a similar position to Bernie Sanders because of principles or because she's pandering to the base?
Well, I think she's moving in that direction because he's doing so well, of course. But I have to respond to Gordon in answering your question about Hillary Clinton. Gordon is just repeating the old simplistic Ricardian economics of free trade. We know better by now. In fact, we always knew better. Yes, I'm a fan of free trade, but there are big losses that come with free trade. He talks about all the benefits to all the families. There are lots of damage done to families when they lose jobs, and large swaths of the economy have lost jobs due to trade. Now, if we're not going to expand the social net to help those people who lose jobs, we better be very careful about free trade. And I'm afraid this simplistic Ricardian analysis really takes us down the wrong path and has for years.
Jeff, it's almost ironic that in 2008, you had the financial crisis, which many analysts say helped create the roots of anger, leading people to support the likes of Donald Trump, or even young millennials, angry, supporting Bernie Sanders, wanting to change the system. But now looking at some of the stats, Jeff, unemployment is lower than ever. Wall Street has been up 40% over the past 5 years. As an outsider, where's all of this anger coming from? Because the economy seems to be doing okay.
Well, it's simple, frankly. Wages are not going up. Lots of people can't get jobs and therefore drop out of the market for looking for jobs and don't show up in the unemployment data. Our employment to population ratio is quite low. If we got it up to the old standards, we'd have a heck of a lot more people working, a heck of a lot more demand in the economy. And because the job market would be tighter, wages would begin to go up. Workers could bargain for higher wages. So we have plenty of room to grow faster. Now, we haven't done that badly. We haven't done as badly as the Republicans claim. The Obama stimulus was a very valuable piece of legislation in 2009. We are not nearly so big that the size of our government would retard economic growth. One fact, the 20th century rate of growth was faster than the 19th century rate of growth.
Right.
In the 20th century, American government kept growing larger and larger, and we kept growing richer and richer.
Okay, I'll let that be the final word from Jeff, the liberal. I'll let that be his final word. I'll get a response from Gordon. So Jeff says we need more stimulus. I think I know what you're going to say, Gordon. You're going to say we need to tighten our belts, aren't you?
Well, Well, I think you can approach this issue from the growth side and from the spending discipline side. I'm frankly not in favor of the austerity that Jeff seems to suggest that folks have been focusing on. Rather, we need to go after the real problems, the entitlements here that are going to grow inexorably and strangle the rest of the federal budget. And then, yes, then we can afford the infrastructure and the other investments that everybody seems to like. And we can do this if we approach entitlements rationally, slow their growth, and then also fix the tax code that I think everybody here thinks is broken. So I think we can do this in a smart way and address the challenges that we have.
Okay, Gordon Gray and Jeff Madrick, we have run out of time, but it's been fascinating picking your brains. Thank you very much for joining us. Still to come on the Newsmakers, can the rhino's greatest predator, mankind, save it from extinction? And in Picture This, why thousands have taken to the streets of Brazil in protest. One of the world's most majestic animals, the rhino, could be extinct within the next 10 years if poachers continue to target the few remaining rhino populations left in the wild. Fueled by a lucrative ivory trade, rhino poaching continues across Africa. And as Gracie Jerome reports, is having a devastating effect on the endangered species.
They've been on the planet for more than 60 million years. These horned creatures were once abundant throughout Africa and Eurasia. But their famed attribute is killing them. Rhino populations are being reduced to near extinction, fueled by a lucrative and illegal trade feeding demand from Asian countries. On the black market, rhino horn can fetch twice as much as gold. Conservationists say poaching levels have reached crisis point.
We've got armed terrorists coming through our border with weapons to shoot our natural heritage. Unfortunately, it's the kind of business that you have to fight fire with fire.
In the last 8 years, South Africa has seen a surge in the number of criminal syndicates exploiting one of its most precious natural resources, the rhino. The government says the number of rhino killed has exploded over the last 5 years. Official figures show 2015 saw the greatest loss of rhino in a single year in history, with more than 1,300 killed. More than 1,200 were killed in 2014, compared to just 333 in 2010 and only 13 in 2007. Kruger National Park is home to the largest population of white rhino in the world. It's also a fertile hunting ground for poachers. The battle to save this species is both costly and dangerous. Rangers have tried installing rhino cams to monitor the animal's movements. They're using drones, satellites and radios to catch the culprits, even cutting off rhino horns before the poachers get to them. But these hunters are well equipped, armed and, so far, unstoppable. The promise of instant cash for spoils has poor villagers lining up to join the illegal trade. So where is the demand coming from? China's economy has climbed a steady 7% in the last year. So too have the fortunes of the Chinese elite, ready to splash cash on rare commodities. It's here where this so-called white gold is most in demand. It's sold for about $60,000 a kilo on the black market. But while some purchase rhino horn to display wealth and status, others within Asian communities believe the horn has medicinal properties. Halting demand and cutting the supply chain is difficult. China has huge investments in South Africa, and political relations between the two are delicate. But at stake is the future existence of rhino. If nothing is done, they could be gone within 10 years. Gracie Jerome, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to discuss why mankind is failing the rhino is Adam Welz, WildAid South Africa representative, a group that aims to stop poaching. Thanks a lot for joining us, Adam. African rhinos could be extinct in 10 years, or within 10 years, according to experts. That's a startling forecast. Why and where have we failed the rhino?
Well, I think we've failed to communicate successfully with buyers of horn in Asia. We failed to communicate the message that a rhino horn doesn't cure any disease. It's not a particularly durable store of wealth. And we failed to communicate just how delicate the situation is in terms of their very survival of our 5 rhino species in the world. I think people, once they understand how their consuming habits, their habits of buying rhino horn actually affect rhinos, I think it causes a lot of them to rethink that. But unfortunately, we're in the grip of some very sophisticated criminal syndicates who are extremely good at marketing their product to people. So people in Asia with money are being told lies, plain and simple. For example, that rhino horn can cure cancer, for which there is absolutely no medical evidence. They're being told that rhino horn is a health tonic, that it will promise them long life. They've been told that, as I say, rhino horn is almost like a gold bar. It's extremely valuable. It's a store of value. It can be used to bribe officials in order to get government contracts and things like this. And a lot of people in Asia who have no primary experience with rhinos in Africa, have no real knowledge of rhinos, believe this. You know, as I say, I think that's our core failure at this point, is really communicating the truth about rhino horn and what's actually happening here in Africa, which is it's not a good situation that we're facing at the moment.
What about those who might say to you, to save the rhino from extinction, let's legalize and regulate the trade?
Yeah, well, there's several things I can say to people who want to legalize the trade in rhino horn. As you might know, and your viewers might know, the international trade in rhino horn is currently illegal. It's also illegal in most of the countries in Asia where people are buying it. It's also illegal to buy and sell largely in Africa. So, the first thing I'd have to say to these people that want to legalize the trade in rhino horn is you've got a huge job ahead of you, changing enormous numbers of laws around the world in order to enable your trade, changing the international community's attitudes towards trade. The international community is extremely negative towards trade at the moment because of past experience. Back in the 1960s, 1970s, when trade was legal, we saw enormous numbers of rhinos being killed for horn. And I would also say to them that, you know, you shouldn't be promoting a useless product to desperate people. As I say, I think there's a moral aspect to this. A lot of people in Asia buy rhino horn because they believe it's going to cure serious disease like cancer, and they spend enormous amounts of money on it. And I think, quite frankly, that's immoral. I also think a very important point that we need to make is, as soon as we legalize rhino horn, we're inviting people to promote its use. We're inviting the people who sell rhino horn to advertise it and further spread these myths about it, and I think that is deeply harmful. And we run the risk of therefore creating runaway demand in Asia, where Asian people, enormous numbers, more Asian people than are buying it right now, are interested in buying it. And the legal trade is simply not big enough. There are simply not enough rhinos to supply that trade, and in a situation of runaway demand, and we will see a massive increase in poaching resulting from that.
Okay, Adam, it's been great talking to you, very informative. Thank you very much for joining us, Adam Welz. In today's Picture This, a federal judge in Brazil has blocked President Dilma Rousseff's appointment of Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva as her chief of staff following mass protests on the streets of Brazil. Let's take a look at the demonstrations that broke out across the country. Today's newsmakers have been these two men behind me, presidential hopefuls from the political fringes. They come from opposite sides of the political spectrum, one a billionaire businessman, the other a democratic socialist. But their economic promises have got some people worried, particularly their protectionist policies when it comes to international trade. And despite America's steady economic recovery, many Americans are drawn to Sanders and Trump's economic rhetoric. Even if Sanders can't catch Clinton, his monetary policies have left a lasting legacy, pulling her round to the left. And economists will be closely watching Trump, who has tapped into the economic zeitgeist, a move that some say could be a dangerous one. You've been watching this edition of The Newsmakers with me, Imran Gata. As always, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.